Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. Welcome to 2025. So, start off the year, let's start it off with a bang. So what I'm going to be doing today, I'm going to be showing you how to get the absolute best tune for your Artemis CP1 or Diana Airbug. However, these are obviously also relevant to the CP2 Chaser, even the CR600. So definitely stick around. Let me show you exactly what I do to get the absolute best out of my pistol. Let's get cracking. Alright, so before we get too far into this, just something I wanted to just clarify. So this tune that I'm going to be showing you today is for efficiency, it's for smoothness of operation, it's also to give you the best accuracy and consistency in between shots. So if you want to go for the ultimate power, this is not the tune. This is for the best consistency out of your air pistol. Alright, so there's some new things that I'm going to be showing you today and some things you might have seen in the past, but definitely I'm going to go through them in a bit of detail with you. So let's start then with, so first things first, let's start with the new one. So what I've done on this spring, so this is the standard 70mm spring, I've actually polished the ends of this spring on both sides. And you might ask, okay, but what's the purpose of polishing this? So if you think about, for example, like a Springer. So with a Springer, you polish these ends so that when you fire it, what happens, the piston, you want it to stay as straight as possible. You don't want it to torque when it's going backwards and forwards. So the same thing applies when we think about our hammer inside a PCP or a CO2 pistol. So what happens is, if it's not polished and it's not free to rotate, so this thing, if you think about this logically, so this has a small little screw that goes in here, and this runs inside this channel over here, but it has play. So if you think about it now, if you've got the spring inside here, and when it's released, it causes this hammer to do this, what it's actually going to end up doing is your whole rifle is going to twist ever so slightly like this. I'm actually going to show you a short little clip where this happened when I was shooting my CP2 the last time. So I'm going to show you that on the CP2, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. Right, first up, in normal speed, as the shot's released, you can see the scope, the crosshairs jumps a little bit to the left. This is now slow speed, and that little bit of movement really affects our accuracy. You see that? Nice and clear. Alright, so there you could see, just like I showed you, you saw it jumped a little bit to the left, and that's due to this not being able to turn freely inside here. So what I've done, I've polished off the ends here, and what we're going to do, we're going to add just a touch, very, very, very little. This is a moly grease, CV joint grease. Just going to put a very little dab of grease on the end here, just to allow it to be able to turn freely inside there and to prevent that torque. So on the one side, we've got this little piece here. So this is definitely going to help us to get free movement on this side, and then we want the same on the opposite side as well. Alright, so that's the first thing that we're going to do. The next thing that I've done, I've polished up my trigger parts. So here you can see where the sear, this engages with the hammer. So basically what's going to happen, this is going to come back like this. It's going to go over here and engage there like that. And then once we're ready and we pull the trigger, it's going to lift this up and this fires the hammer. So this is all polished up. You can see nice and shiny there, and over here as well. And then what I've also done, I've just polished this little grub screw over here, and that's going to just, so that when it engages with the sear, it's nice and smooth. We don't get any crankiness inside there or any graunchiness. We want it to be like glass on glass. Alright, so that's the second thing I've done, and I'm going to put all of this back together now and you'll see exactly how I do that. The next thing that I've done is on my transfer port, I've actually made this a little bit smaller. So I've reduced it from 3.5 millimeters to 3 millimeters. The reason for this, what it's going to do for me, it's going to give me more shots and it's going to give me a flatter spread when it comes to FPS. So definitely also something that I like to do since I've done it on my CP2 and it worked effectively. I'm going to do the same on my CP1 as well. Alright, so that's that. Then the rest of what we're going to do is basically finer little lubrications where we need it, and just to make sure that we get this absolutely as smooth and as consistent as possible. So what I also like to do when I'm working on my pistol is just to make sure that everything is nice and clean. So before I start to put everything back together, I want it to be nice and clean, and then we're just going to put a little bit of lubrication in some strategic points. Alright, let's then start to assemble this whole batch of things. Okay, so just a quick talk about the lubricants that we're going to use when it comes to assembling this. So I'm going to use a little bit of grease. So this is just the moly, and this works great with anything to do with springs. I really like to use this. This is actually a CV joint grease, but it works perfectly for this. Then I've got a little bit of oil. So this is just a normal, very thin oil that they use on sewing machines, on hair clippers, and this is safe to use with O-rings. So a little bit of oil. Yes, for example, if you think about lubricating these O-rings, silicone oil does work. However, we're going to be lubricating some metal parts as well. For example, like this hammer, we're going to lubricate a little bit on the outsides so that it runs smoothly. And when it's metal on metal, then you do not want to use silicone oil. Then you want to rather use a normal mineral oil. Alright, so let's get cracking then. First things first, let's start to assemble here again. So I'm going to just take this oil, just put a dab of oil on here. You'll also see that these are all polished. This is polished to 600 grit, so nice and smooth, and that's going to allow us to get free movement inside this tube. And you saw I did clean out the inside of the tube as well, and quite a while back I actually polished out this tube on the inside, so that's also been done. Alright, so let's put in our hammer. What we need here as well, I think let's first, before we put the hammer, let's first put the valve back. Another thing that you want to check when you're busy with this is your seal on your valve. So this little seal over here, and the reason for that is if your valve is not sealing nicely, or your CO2 capsule doesn't seal nicely, then you're going to lose CO2 during your shooting cycle, and that's something that you want to try and avoid at all costs, because when you lose CO2, ultimately you're not going to get the number of shots that you should be getting, and that's not what we want. On the CO2 valve, on the valve itself, not much that I'm going to do there. Just a small drop of oil on the valve stem, just to lubricate that so that it can move freely. But other than that, not much I'm going to be doing there. Alright, then let's go to the hammer. Put the hammer in here. Remember, it comes with this little screw, and you'll see this little screw has got a small little brass washer, and the reason for that washer, it acts like a spring washer, and that just helps this to get locked in position and to stay in position. So give that a good snug, because what often happens on these, especially when they're new, this little cap screw comes loose and this causes all sorts of havoc. Alright, so there we got that, that's good to go. Alright, I'm going to put the transfer port in later. So the next thing that I'm going to do is on my bolt action. So if you look here, you can actually see it's a little bit dirty here, so I'm just going to clean this off. And what we're going to do is we're going to re-lubricate this. But before we lubricate it, I want to make sure that this cap screw that's inside here, that it's also tight, because this can tend to come loose with time, and that's the last thing you want. Alright, so if you've got a CP2 or a CR600 or even a PR900, it will have a small little screw in here that you can use to adjust how freely your bolt moves. This, however, does not have that, but you can see that they were planning it when they built these, so maybe some of the later models will come out with that little adjustment there. So all I'm going to do here, I'm just going to put a drop of oil on the bolt itself, and I'm going to put one at the back as well, and then just cycle it a few times. You just want that nice smooth free movement, and then we're good to go. Alright, so that's our bolt sorted. We've got our hammer sorted this side. Alright, so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to actually assemble this breech block onto our tube. Then we know that part is done. Then we still got to work on the hammer, and we still got to work on the trigger. Alright, so let's put this all together. So we're going to take our transfer port, just going to put again just a little drop of oil on here, just to lubricate these O-rings. They don't see much wear, these O-rings. I've never actually replaced these O-rings in the past, so definitely not a concern. Let me just loosen this valve a little bit. There we go. Okay, so next up, what we can do, when it comes to putting this breech onto the tube, what you want to do, put your hammer as far back as you can and put your bolt as far forward as you can. The reason for this is because this bolt needs to actually push this hammer back against the sear, so it needs to be in front. This cap screw needs to be behind this cap screw inside here. Alright, let's put this together. Okay, now we can move that bolt back, and got this small little cap screw here. So one thing I do like about the single shot CP1 versus the multi-shot is that it's got a cap screw here instead of that little countersink screw, because that countersink screw seems to strip sometimes, and that can really mess your day up if that happens. Alright, so we got that attached again. Okay, so next step is going to be to put in our spring. Alright, so what we're going to do, we're going to take, I've got this on an injection, I'm just going to put a little bit on this earbud. Literally that's more than enough to be able to do this. So what I'm going to do, just going to take this and just put a very thin layer right on the edge, and the same on this side. You really don't need to put a lot. this lubrication is going to stay here at least for 1,000 shots. Alright, then we're going to put back our little spring guide. That's good. And then we're just going to slide this into the hammer. Into the hammer. And then what I like to do is I'm just going to push this back a little bit, just so that I can align the spring guide with our end cap here. Push that in there. And then I'm going to put this cap screw back in here. Alright, I'm sure all of you are still with me. Very simple, nothing complicated so far. Alright, then we can just test it, make sure that everything is smooth. There you can see, nice and smooth. And now what we need to do last on the internals is our trigger. So let's put the sear first. Remember, it's got this little spring here, and it's got a small slot at the bottom there that it needs to go into. Like that. Alright. Okay, so the first pin is in. Then next up we're going to put this front pin. So some guys like to put a little bit of oil on the trigger. I prefer not to. I find that what it does is it kind of changes a little bit, so it's not as consistent as I'd like it. But if you like to put a bit of lubrication on your trigger, by all means go for it. There we go. Alright, so what you can do, if you look here, you'll see there's a small little grub screw. This grub screw, when it comes standard, it takes a 1.5 millimeter Allen key. When it comes out normally, it's actually usually turned around so that you can adjust it from this side. However, I turn this grub screw around and I adjust it out a little bit just so that it engages the sear. Must just engage the sear a little bit. You'll see there. So that's without. Before I put that pin in, you see it's already engaging a little bit. And then if I put this in, so what this does is it really takes away a lot of that first stage. And this will help as well to reduce the pull on this trigger. So just like that. So let's just test now everything is working. There we loaded, nice and gentle. Perfect, 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 perfect. Happy with that. There's the first stage, and there it breaks. Nice and light trigger. I'm very happy with that. And then all that's left after that is put back in the stock. It's that simple, very easy to tune these up, and believe me, if you tune it like I've just showed you now, you're going to absolutely love shooting your little pistol, and you're going to shoot it more often. So, till next time guys, happy shooting, see you around.